Hey, what's going on guys, SnivyPootis here and welcome back to another video. Now in this video I will be telling you 22 Savage tips that will help you improve at the game drastically and just hopefully be able to help you get through that party finder struggle, or if you're just in a static, you can actually use these to improve your gameplay in there too. Whether you're a veteran player or a beginner, all these tips are going to be helpful for you in some way. So if any of these tips did help you, be sure to leave a like please, as it really does help my channel grow and it helps me out in the algorithm, and overall I'll just really appreciate it. And if you really like this video and want to see more like it, why not subscribe? Because it's free and you can do it, unsubscribe it anytime that you want to. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get to the first tip. Tip number 1, pick a job and stay on it. And while this may seem like a kind of a dead given, all dead whatever, you know, just like obvious, like of course you don't want to just keep swapping jobs. What I mean by that is, like, you know, pick one job that you know you're absolutely gonna be really good at, and that you know, not just because it's meta. Don't pick a job just because it's meta, which I'll get more into later. But make sure you pick a job that is a job that you like, and a job that you know that you'll be able to perform well in a high-end environment, whether that be Savage, Extreme Trials, or Ultimates. You want to make sure you pick a job that you're 100% comfortable on, so that way you won't have to worry about, you know, optimizing it too much because it's a job that you've played a lot already. That being said, once you do find a job that you want to play, whether it be a melee or physical range or caster, make sure to go to the balance Discord, as it has very helpful tips for all jobs, whether it's a healer or tank or melee, physical range, whatever. Any job that you want to play in a Savage environment has tons and tons of things that you can research in the balance. Obviously there's other resources as well, like you can search up YouTube videos, or you can go to Awk Morning if you're a summoner or anything like that. But the one-stop place for any sort of Savage related tips and just ways to optimize your job really is you're going to find it in the balance, and I will leave a link in the description if you want to go into there yourself if you're not in there already. But if you're going to go into Savage rating, I'd highly recommend joining the balance. Tip number 2, learn Party Finder. And while this also may seem like a kind of a, you know, well, of course everyone knows how to use Party Finder. What I mean by that, it's not just, you know, learn how to use it. I mean also learn how it works, learn the culture, learn what's acceptable and what's not, learn how to properly, you know, make a party finder if you ever need to make one yourself, because there's not always going to be a party finder for the specific fight that you want to do. Sometimes you have to make it yourself, which which might seem a little bit more complicated than it actually is. So once you open up the party finder, you can see here all these well, there's not many parties on right now because I'm recording this at a really awkward time, so there's not a whole lot of parties. But in peak hours you will see like at least 20 to 30 different party finders for different fights, whether it be fights with current tier or ultimates, or current high-end, well not high-end, current extreme trials. You will find all that sort of stuff here. You don't need to mess with anything else unless you're doing an older extreme trial, and then you want to go to the trial section. But everything current is in the high-end beauty section. So if you want to do current high-end content, you're going to find it in the high-end section, with the exception of ultimates, because ultimates will always be in the high-end section because they're still considered relevant in some way, because it's an ultimate. But anyway, whenever you're making a party finder, you want to make sure that you include all the proper strats for said party finder, whether it be, you know, group 1 northwest, group 2 southeast, or something like healers west, east, and tanks north and south, or party stack south, or whatever it is for the fight. You want to make sure you know exactly what all the strats are for that fight, or at least the strats that you want to do. Because if you know the strats that you want to do, then all you need to do is put in the strats for that you're doing, or that you want to do for that fight, so that way the people who join are knowing, okay, he wants to do, let's just use P6 for example, they want to do diamond limit cut, which is this diamond weapon version of flood race, and they're like, okay, well, they want to do diamond limit cut style, so let's just do that, and that's what I want to do, so they'll join. So that way you don't have people joining like, oh, I thought this was the party for doing so I don't know, Ilya strat for limit cut, and you know, then you'll have a whole ass argument about that. It's just not worth it. So make sure you put in the strats that you want to do, especially if there's multiple strats for one mechanic in the fight, because that can lead to a lot of confusion, and it really just clears up everything, so you know that every person who's joining knows exactly what they're getting into. And also make sure that your prog point is on point. If you're on one mechanic, don't put the mechanic above it. But the general rule for Party Finder that I've learned is that if you are progging for a certain mechanic, then you're usually going to be on the mechanic before that for a while. So if you're joining one, make it okay, well, cool, they're on the mechanic that I'm on. Just be prepared to do prog to the mechanic right before you actually get to it. That's all I'm going to say. Tip number 3, look up guides. Now, this may seem like another again, obvious thing to do, but so you'd be surprised by a lot of people who go into a Savage fight for the first time and they just straight up don't look at any guides, or don't look at any strat guides or anything like that. And while I know some people love to blind prog, you don't go into a Party Finder or a static that is not fully agreed upon. Okay, we're doing this blind 100%, no guides, no nothing. Like, if you want to do that and everyone else wants to do that, that's great, but don't go into a Party Finder or join a static that doesn't do blind prog and then expect them to be blind with you, because that's not only going to slow you down, it's going to slow everyone else down, and nobody wants to be slowed down when they're progging. Whether it be week 1 or week 26, no one likes having to have a blind progger in there, or just someone who just doesn't look at guides, because it's just not fun and just doesn't really work well for everyone else. So be sure to look up guides if you're doing it not blind, because you don't want to slow everyone down, obviously. So search it up on YouTube. That's the best place to find all the guides for. Or you can try the 14 toolbox, that also works a little bit for specific strats. But if you want to look at full in-depth guides, be sure to watch YouTubers like Hector Henderson or MTQ Capture, Xenos Vex, or whoever you want to look at for guides. June Bob, there's plenty of people out there. Tip number 4, learn every strat for every mechanic. Now, while I hate to admit it, there are some different strats that are better than others, but there's also strats that people just like to do for comfort levels or just uptime. The main reason why anyone does a different strat is for uptime. Like, if you see someone wanting to do some really weird strat that you've never seen before, it's probably because it gives them more uptime compared to the more common strat. So make sure you just learn every single possible strat for a mechanic if you're doing it Party Finder way. Because if you're going to a Party Finder, you want to make sure you have more options. Because if you only want to do Diamond Limit Cut, again, I'm going back to P6 for example. If you only want to do Diamond Limit Cut, but there's only parties for Ilya strat, then you're going to be like, okay, well, I don't know how to do Ilya, so I can't join that. But if you learn how to do both strats, then you'll have way more options in the future for joining Party Finders, because you won't be limited to just people who only want to do Diamond Limit Cut. So make sure that you research every possible mechanic that is semi-popular, not just every single mechanic that you come across or every single strat that you come across for that mechanic, because not every strat may be used in a Party Finder sense, because Party Finder strats and static strats may be different, because some statics may have a whole different strat compared to Party Finder. So make sure you just learn what Party Finder likes to do, not just what everyone knows to do. Tip number 5, install the calculator. Now you may be wondering what I'm talking about. For those you don't know, I'm not gonna say it out loud, but you know what I'm talking about. If you're getting serious into Savage, and you want to, learn how to play your job correctly and do as much damage as you possibly can, then obviously you're gonna need this, because, if you really want to know how much damage you're doing and how well you're doing compared to everyone else, and, needing to know how to improve, then you want to make sure you have this running in the background. Now this may seem, if you're on PlayStation 4 or 5, then this might be a bit harder, but if you do have like a laptop or something that you can use, you can hook that up through a network and that'll work as well. But if not, then well, you might just have to ask someone that you're Party Findering with or in your static if they can send the fight logs to you so that you'll know what your damage is for every fight. That's usually what most people will do. or you can, if you're lucky, you might have someone who uploads the logs, the FF logs, and I'll get more into that in another tip, and they will be able to, you'll be able to see it there too, because that's just access for everybody who was in that fight. It uploads it for everyone, so you'll be able to see it regardless of whether you upload it or not. And that brings me to my next tip: use 14 analysis. And 14 analysis actually only works if you uploaded the log already, but let's just go off the premise that you've got the log, whether you're a PS4 or a PC or whatever. You uploaded the log, someone uploaded the log for you, and it's already on FF logs. You can grab the link from the damage done report and put it into 14 analysis, and that will tell you basically everything you need to know about how well you're doing. So if you're doing this right, doing that right, or it just tells you all the things you're doing right or wrong on your job and what you need to be doing to improve, so that you can be as best as you can and most optimal as you can. It may not be 100% accurate sometimes, because there are certain scenarios where, okay, well, I can cast there, so, and then 14 else to say like, what are you doing? You weren't casting there, or whatever, or obviously if it's pure downtime, it won't count it against you, but there will be times where you literally are doing a strat that requires you to run away or something like that, and there's no uptime version for it, and the game will be like, well, what are you doing? You weren't casting GCDs for like almost 20 seconds, and it'll be like, okay, well, I couldn't because I had to get away from the boss. It was a sprite mechanic or something like that, and there's no uptime version of the strat for that you can do at the time in order to get that GCD in. So sometimes it won't be always 100% accurate, but it is definitely nice to have if you ever want to get more into your job side of Savage raiding, and you want to improve your job and make sure that you're 100% optimized and climb the ranks, and that's my next tip: learn FF logs. Now this is only really if you want to actually get into the whole numbers side of Savage raiding. Obviously numbers is not going to really matter much until you start getting your gear and then eventually get best in slot, but once you do get to that point, let's just say you are, then you want to know how FF logs works, because it's pretty important if you want to actually get anywhere or know where you are in current standing compared to everyone else, because it just has all the information that you can possibly need in terms of your damage, your healing, your mechanic consistency, all that stuff. So if you want to know how well you're doing, just make sure you check your FF logs as often as possible, and you also learn how it works. I'm not going to make a whole video, I'm not going to go into too much detail about it in this little tip here, but I will say that if you want to get into Savage raiding and once you get to best in slot, you're like, okay, well, I want to still improve and still climb the ranks and maybe get to top 10 or something, then you want to know how FF logs work, so that you can research and get those numbers down and improve and all that stuff. Tip number 8: get yourself ready for every fight. Now this isn't really too much of a stretch here. You just want to make sure that you have the minimum idle level requirement, because every fight has an idle level requirement that you need to get into, and it's usually like a 5 gap between every fight, except for the last one. Sometimes it might be the same as the third, or sometimes it might be a little bit higher. In this current tier, the current item level range is 600 to 610. So if you're idle level 600, then you should be able to get into P5, and if you're 610, you'll be able to get into any fight in the tier. And the best way to be 610 right now, and the quickest way, is just to make crafted gear, or to get it somehow, whether it's to buy it or have someone else make it for you. Usually some people buy it because it's usually not too expensive, but sometimes it might be a little bit, so you're better off just asking some crafting friend to do it for you and just giving them the materials needed for it, and that'll be your best bet if you're not a crafter yourself. Obviously if you're a crafter yourself, then you can make it yourself, but it's better off to always just have the crafted gear instead of trying to get tome gear or anything like that, because it's just always the best way to get good gear, or at least starting gear for the current tier, every tier. Tip number 9: learn how snapshot works. Again, this may seem like a kind of a given. Like if you've been playing 14 for a while, you'll know how snapshot works. But there are certain mechanics in certain Savage fights that work really weird with Snapshot. My best example is P5S with Devour. The jumps on Devour will actually not register as quickly as you think it is, because like you may think like, okay, well, I wasn't in that, so I won't get hit, and then you get hit and you're like, okay, what the hell, what happened? How it really works is that as soon as the AoE grows to its max size, you know, it grows to its max size and then it disappears, that's when the snapshot happens. So it's kind of hard to show in a single video, but again, I'm not going to go into too much detail about it because I'll be here for like an hour. But long and short of it is, as soon as the AoE appears and disappears, that's when the snapshot happens. So if you're in the AoE at any point when it like starts to disappear, that's when the game like registers, okay, was there someone in here? And if they were in here, then they're gonna get hit. And if they weren't in here, then they're not gonna get hit. So it's always just better to just respect the mechanic if you're not sure the exact snapshot timing, because every AoE in the game has a different snapshot timing. And obviously in Savage, AoEs are not marked all the time. Some AoEs might be marked, some might not be. So in Savage, you really gotta be mindful of those AoE sizes. So if you know how big the AoE is from the normal fight, then you're just gonna have to keep it in your head, like, okay, the AoE is about this size. I should be out of here, and I can sneak in 1 or 2 DCDs, and then I can get out. Because you don't want to, you know, greed, and then once you like try and get out, then oh, oops, you got snapshotted and now you're dead, or you got snapshotted and now you got damage down. Regardless, getting hit by an AoE in Savage is gonna suck, whether it insta kills you or not. So it's always better to just respect the mechanic and just know how snapshot works for each AoE in the current tier, so that way you know what you can and can't get away with. Tip number 10: make a mitigation plan. Now, this only really applies to like healers or tanks, but DPS do have mitigation as well that they need to keep track of. DPS might have stuff like Mana Ward for Black Mage, or Ninja has Shade Shift, or you know, Samurai has Third Eye, and then there's also Dancer's Shield Samba and Machinist Tactician, all that good stuff. Every DPS has some sort of mit, whether it be self mitigation or party mitigation or raid, whatever you want to call it. And you want to make sure that you balance it out so that it's always being used, because it's always better to use it, whether it's you may use it for the wrong time, and that's okay, because you might be like, okay, well, that AoE didn't hurt me that much, but this spread mechanic really hurts and it almost one-shot me every time. So it's always better to just use your self-mitigation or party mitigation, and when you know there isn't going to be a more crucial moment to use it, because it's always easier on the healers, because you're not, you know, taking tons of damage. Because if the healers have to heal you more, then they're not doing damage more, and that slows down the fight a little bit. And the best way to get through a fight is to have everyone doing constant damage without having to babysit individual people, if that makes any sense. Because you don't want to have the healers constantly having to heal people back to full every time before an AoE, because they're not mitigating. Because, you know, Savage AoEs do hurt quite a bit, especially in day 1 gear. Like, they can literally one-shot you. It's like practically an in-range AoE if you don't mitigate it properly, or if at all. So always make sure to mitigate everything as possible. Even if it may seem like a smaller AoE compared to like the big charged AoEs that every boss does, you always want to mitigate it, because you never know when an AoE might actually kill you in one hit, or it brings you down to like 5 HP, and especially if you're a tank. Because if you're a tank, then you're gonna get auto attacks in between that, so that can even pile even more damage. So yeah, make sure to always have a mitigation plan written out for yourself. Obviously, don't make a spreadsheet or anything, but just make sure that you know what you're going to be using at certain points during every fight, so that you can minimize the amount of damage coming out and make your healers a little bit less stressed out. And that brings me to my next tip: use all of your cooldowns. Pretty straightforward. make sure that you aren't constantly using all of your cooldowns. Whether it may seem like a minimal cooldown or something that you may not need, it's always better to use it than just let it sit there, because it's either wasted damage or just wasted mitigation. Because you may think, oh well, I don't need mana ward right now. This AoE doesn't hurt that much, and I won't be needing it for a while because there's no damage coming out for a while. Well, it's better to just use it, especially if it's a defensive cooldown. It's always better to use it because, like I said before, it puts less strain on the healers, and it just ensures that you won't be taking too much damage, and it won't take you as long to get back to full health, because the more GCD heals they have to put out, the less damage that they can put out during downtime, quote unquote, whenever the boss isn't casting a major mechanic that you have to resolve properly. So make sure to use all of your cooldowns. Make sure, whether it's offensive or defensive, make sure you use all of your cooldowns as much as possible. Tip number 12, keep raid buffs online as much as possible. Now, it's a little bit harder in certain fights to keep raid buffs constantly flowing, you know, making sure that all raid buffs are constantly in sync with each other and that nobody's, you know, like way off base, or, you know, you don't have your embolden like 10 seconds after div or anything like that. So it's always better to just work it out with your team, like, okay, do we want to hold buffs here? Do we want to pop them immediately? Do we want to, you know, delay them a little bit, like 1 GCD? Because it's always better to just work that out in advance. I mean, in a party finder sense, it's always just better to just pop it off cooldown, because whether you get to get the full use out of it or not, popping it off cooldown ensures that it stays synced with everyone else's, because you can't really communicate with party finder on the fly, like, okay, do we want to hold buffs here, or I'm holding buffs here, or anything like that. Especially if you have a selfish raid buff like trick attack or ley lines or presence of mind, because having those synced out or out of sync with everyone else's raid buffs can kind of screw you over in terms of your RDPS, because that does count towards your RDPS if you miss those. And really, the best damage that you're going to get out during a fight is during burst windows with raid buffs on. So having raid buffs on, or raid buffs aligned, is crucial to keeping the fight flowing and keeping damage consistent and high. Because if you have raid buffs, you may think, okay, well, it's not a big of a deal, if I get the damage, I get the damage. But if you have a critical raid buff, like let's say something like Searing Light or Battle Litany, like if you have Battle Litany and Searing Light like 20 seconds away from each other, you won't get the full use out of both of them at the same time. While Battle Litany is on a shorter cooldown, it's still just better to have your raid buffs all coming out at the same time, because if you have Battle Litany and Chain Strat, so for example, because they're both critical buffing raid buffs, if you have them way off base with each other, then they're gonna not have as much effectiveness if they're stacked on at the same time like they're supposed to be. Because 10% raid buffs compared to 20% is always better, because that's just how it is. Higher numbers means higher damage, and that means quicker kills. Hit number 13, communicate with your team. Now, well, communicating is kind of a dead giveaway. Obviously, you can't really communicate well when it comes to party finder, but when you're in a static, it's always better to just have as much communication as possible and make sure everyone knows what's going on at all times, especially if you are doing a different kind of way to handle mechanic, like, hey, melee DPS, I'm going to be going over to where you usually are because I want to see if this is a better spot to stand for this mechanic for us to get uptime, because I don't have positionals or whatever the hell is going on. And if they don't know that, then they're going to be like, what the hell, why were you standing there? And that's the whole argument breaking out. So it's better to always have max communication with your team and making sure that they know what's going on and know what strats you're doing and know what kind of healing plan you want to have out, and how you're going to handle tank busters, if they're shared busters, or if it's a solo buster, if you want to info on it. Always make sure you communicate what you're doing with your team so that they know what's going on and they don't accidentally screw you over or screw themselves over because you didn't tell them that you're going to do something. Especially if you're in a static, communication is 100% needed. And tip number 14, stay level-headed. Now, we all get tilted in video games, okay? Even I Nova, I've gotten tilted in games before. Even in 14 itself, I've gotten a little bit mad at people. Never like, you know, keyboard breaking bullcrap or anything like that. But I do tend to get mad, and everyone gets mad at games. That's just a part of life. That's just a part of gaming. Everyone gets mad at playing a video game, whether it be a MMO or a shooter or a fighting game or whatever. But in Savage, it's really important to try and keep yourself level-headed and just, you know, say to yourself, it's just a game, it's okay, I'm okay, there's something going wrong. Cause, like, you know, sometimes you can't really do anything about it when it's Party Finder, because people will get mad and then they'll start being like, what the hell, why do you keep killing me with your spread, or what the hell, why do I keep getting tank busters, tanks, what's going on, or blah 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 blah. People always get mad at games. That's just something that's part of gaming. So you can't really prevent other people from getting mad, but if you yourself prevent yourself from getting mad, then that's just less people, you know, getting all heated and arguing with each other about stupid crap that doesn't really matter that much. Because at the end of the day, like, if you start getting mad, then that's just going to slow down prog, and, you know, or just slow down the reclear, because you don't want to start getting mad and then make even more mistakes and then get even more mad, and then it just kind of snowballs into you just dying like 4 times and preventing people from clearing because you can't be in rage because your DPS is so low. So it's always better to just keep yourself as little level-headed as possible and calm, so that you don't end up making more mistakes or just tilting other people off, because more people tilted just makes prog slower, because you're sitting there arguing and getting mad at each other. And it's just better not to have those hidden tensions, because hidden tensions, especially in a static, can really just tear it apart from the inside, and it's just not a good feeling whenever you just know that 2 people are pissed off at each other all the time, and it just makes things not as enjoyable. So just remember to try and keep as level-headed as possible, take deep breaths, you know, just sit there and just, if you need to, just take fire or anything like that, which will tie into my next tip, which is tip number 15, know when to take a break. And this isn't really something that is always possible, but if you're in Party Finder and you have the freedom of, you know, doing it whenever you want to, by doing it, I mean, like, you know, going to a fight whenever you want to. If you just cleared P5 and P6, but they were like really terrible parties, you know, people were bickering, people were not spreading probably, or people weren't healing, but you managed to get through it anyway somehow by some miracle, it's always better to just sit back and just, you know, go play a different game for a little bit, or watch some YouTube videos, eat some snacks, maybe take a drink of water, take a lap around the house, something like that. Just something to calm your mind and get yourself off of that whatever toxic situation that you just got out of from that Party Finder. Because if you know when to take a break and know when to, you know, take a breather and not to overwhelm yourself or push yourself too hard, then you won't end up making more mistakes, and you'll be more calm and be reset basically for the next fight, and you'll come back and maybe you'll have a better experience, maybe you won't. But if you keep going on and on and on trying to push yourself past your limit, then you're just going to quickly realize that things are going to start going downhill again. Tip number 16, be aware of your surroundings. Now, this more applies if you're like a tank or a melee, because Fizz range or sometimes casters have the benefit of not having to be anywhere near people sometimes for certain mechanics, especially during spread mechanics, because, you know, they can hit the balls from anywhere. But if you're a melee or a tank or even a healer, sometimes you want to always make sure that you're aware of your surroundings. And so that being said, if there's a tank buster coming up and you know there's a tank buster coming up, make sure to be as far away from the tanks as possible, because, you know, obviously if it's a tank mechanic where the tank can hit you with the spread, then they might accidentally kill you with the tank buster, and whether that's their fault or not is not really up for debate, because at the end of the day, you should not beat any of the tanks during any tank buster, unless it's like, you know, literally a tank buster that does not cleave. But most tank busters in statics in Savage fights cleave. It may not cleave all the time, like for example, P5S Toxic Crunch does not cleave, but Venomous Mass does. So you might want to, you know, you might have your tank stack on top of you with Toxic Crunch and you go, okay, I'm fine. But Venomous Mass definitely can and will kill you if you are not careful. So make sure to always be aware of where you're standing so that you don't accidentally get yourself killed by a tank buster. Tip number 17, make sure to practice as much as you possibly can. because obviously you want to make sure that you're keeping yourself sharp, you know, practicing your rotation, making sure that you know your job well and you know the fight. By practice, I also mean try and go for other, you know, ways of practicing, like join practice parties. Obviously is the most obvious one, because practice parties is basically the same as progging, but for Party Finder. So if you see a practice party for a mechanic, then make sure to just hop right in there and just get yourself some practice to get yourself familiar with any mechanic possible that may trip you up during the fight when you actually go for the clear. Also, it's also fine to go for stuff like Stone Sky C and, you know, hit the striking dummy to see, okay, well, how fast did I kill it, or how fast did I didn't kill it, and how much time did I have left, all that good stuff, because it also really gives you a good way of seeing how, you know, how well off you are in terms of damage compared to everyone else. Because if you can kill it, then that's a good sign. But if you can't kill it, then there's always something that you need to work on, whether it be aligning your buffs better, or, you know, keeping your positional straight, or anything like that. Obviously, hitting a striking dummy is not always going to be the best way to practice, but it's still a way of, you know, gauging where you are in the current tier, or like, you know, where you are on your job as of where you need to improve. Because sometimes you may notice it, sometimes you may not, but there's always going to be something that you can improve upon at some point when you're doing Savage fights. Tip number 18, be willing to try something different. Now, this is kind of a given. This kind of ties into what I said before with learning every strat. If someone proposes a different way of doing a strat that's still kind of similar, but it may be different to what you're used to, at least give it a try, because it's better to maybe you might like it more than what you're doing now. You never know that, and it's always better to just be like, okay, well, I guess we can try that strat, and boom, maybe it's better. And if it's not, then it's like, okay, well, that didn't really work out well, let's just keep doing what we were doing. Obviously, you don't want to sit there arguing and bickering and be like, okay, well, I like this strat, so I'm doing this strat, or I can't do that, that's stupid, or blah blah blah. Always better to just sit there and be like, okay, we can try this, and if it doesn't work out, then I just prefer to keep doing what I like to do, because it's just easier and it's more consistent and it's just a lot more comfortable for me right now. But always be willing to try something different for any strat, or just in general, because you never know when you might need to switch things up. Tip number 19, probably one of the most important ones: respect every mechanic. Now, this may be a given, but there are people who will be like, oh dude, don't worry about X mechanic, that's so brain dead, there's no need to worry about it, we'll get to it, no problem. Because once you set that bar and be like, oh, this mechanic's easy, I won't have to worry about it, it's super easy, blah blah blah, then you're gonna be more frustrated whenever you inevitably die to it like 6 times in a row, and you're okay, well, what the heck, this is just supposed to be the easy mechanic, why are we struggling on this? Because while a mechanic may seem easy for you, it may not be easy for someone else in the static or the Party Finder, and you have to realize that everyone learns at a different pace compared to other people. Not everyone's a fast learner, not everyone's a slow learner, not everyone's like a mid, slow, or fast learner. Like, you can't really predict what's going to happen with every mechanic. You're not going to be like, okay, well, this mechanic's super easy, there's no way we're going to be struggling on this, and then just expect to get through it no problem. You have to be ready for any possible, you know, length of difficulty when it comes to mechanic, because some people might struggle more on the easier looking mechanics and be like breeze through the harder looking mechanic, because there's always a really precedent when it comes to someone saying, oh, this is hard, or this is easy, because you can never really like judge how something's gonna be until you actually go in there and start doing it. Because hell, it might even be harder for you once you actually start doing it, because looking at a guide and seeing some people doing perfectly is obviously going to be different than, you know, actually doing it yourself. And tip number 20, always make sure that you have everything you need before you go into a raid, and that means pots, food, and, you know, obviously your gear. But pots and food is the most important thing. Just remember the pot is really the most crucial information that I can give you, because potting in burst windows is really beneficial to getting your clears faster. And I know that potting is more of a personal commitment, and not everyone wants to, you know, care about that too much. Not everyone cares about parsing, which is okay. There's nothing wrong with not wanting to parse, But even if you don't parse, it's always better to just sneak in a pot anyway, because it's really it just increases your damage, and there's no downside to potting, like basically zero. Because like, yeah, make sure it might, if you have bad ping, it might, you know, clip your GCD a little bit, but if other than that, you really don't have many reasons not to pot, because it's just super helpful, and it's just really it just really helps you get through things faster, and it increases your damage by a ton. So it's just better to just pot anyway, and to try and get those damage numbers higher and higher to get clears faster and faster. And my final tip number 21, play what you want. Now, this is the best advice I can give you all day, is just play what you want. Yeah, and I know I already said that, but I'm just saying it again, play what you want. Because while you may think that, oh well, oh crap, I can't play Machinist, it's not meta anymore, it's not good, no one likes Machinist, and people want Dancer because it brings dance partner and tech step. It's like, don't care. If you want to play Machinist, go for it. No one's gonna physically stop you from playing Machinist if that's what you'd like to play, because if that's what you're good at and that's what you bring the higher damage numbers on, then it's always better to play what you want rather than to just play whatever the party wants. Because if you play what the party wants, then you're just going to be sitting there being like, okay, well, I don't know how to play Dancer, but I'll try my best anyway, and then you're going to be sitting there doing like 5k DPS less than you normally do because you don't know how to play Dancer, because you should play Machinist. So if you want to play Machinist, even if it may not seem like it's a meta job right now, then I'd say just go play Machinist anyway, because if you can do more damage numbers on Machinist, then it's always better to just play that job rather than just playing what is so-called meta, because meta in Final Fantasy XIV honestly doesn't really matter that much. There's always going to be better jobs obviously out there than other jobs, and people want to play certain jobs for like higher damage so that they can speed kill or whatever. But if you want to play a certain job, whether it's meta or not, just play it. Because if you're good at that job and you know how it works like the back of your hand, then you're obviously going to be performing well, and better than if you were to try and play a job that you're not familiar with, but you're only playing because it's meta. And that'll do it for this video, guys. Like I said, if any of these tips helped you, be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you really like the video, because that just really helps me out in the algorithm, and I'd really appreciate any sort of attention that I can get. Because if any of these tips help, then obviously it's just better off for you, but I can't really justify everything, you know, that I said. But if you ever want clarification, then I'm always around. You can always DM me on Discord or anything like that, or you can sound in the comments below and ask me there too. And that being said, I will see you all in the next video, and I hope you have a great day. Peace out.
Still a piece of garbage.